Hello. Farah Colors. Hi. Coming to us from India, from Pune. Hello. Let's see. Suzanne Chroma, Atari 81, Lebanon. Hey, hi. Hello, everybody. Hello, all of you. Helen Wilding. Yes, hi. Finally, you can join us. Rita, yes, I'm wearing a shirt to recognize the new time zone that we are in. Welcome, everybody. This is USkTalks coming to you again with another episode. Today, we are celebrating our 2-month anniversary. We've been on the air, coming to you live on Instagram for 2 months now. Can you believe that? That's amazing. And thank you all for coming in. Hello, hey, Debbie from LA, from Moscow, wow, from California. So it is like you guys are coming in, and it's 12 hours earlier, and we have people coming in just after dinner on the west coast of the US, through much of Europe. I think people are asleep, which is fine. And through the Middle East and India and Asia, Australia, New Zealand, we're keeping you company as you enjoy your breakfast or your lunch or your tea or whatever it is. So awesome. Chicago, awesome. You're not asleep yet. That's good. From Austin, Texas, from California. Oh, awesome. So good to see you guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Toronto, yes, it's midnight in Toronto. Well, now you know what it's like for me when I was hosting from Hong Kong at midnight. It's noon in Hong Kong. Many people will be enjoying dim sum, but today I am really happy to join you guys again and be back. Thank you so much, Rita, for taking the show, last week, for hosting so that I could take a little bit of a break. But you know what? I have to say, I missed you guys. So it's really good to be back on USkTalks. Okay, so we got a great show for you today. We have lots and lots of questions. Speaking of questions, yes, well, you know what to do. Hit your questions in the comments and I will try to get back to you. Oh, hi. We've got our hosts on. We have all our guests on. I can see that. That's awesome. Let me make sure that our first guest is ready to go. We've got 2 incredible people whom I'm also very honored and happy to say are friends of mine. If you've seen the promos, you will know that we're talking about Suhita and Gabi, right? So they've got lots of things to share with us. But first, I mean, you know that we're talking about questions today, and I have a question for you. Because I'm sure that a lot of you, when you first started urban sketching, like I'm curious, when you first started urban sketching, how did you choose what to draw? Like personally for me, I was just so excited to start drawing stuff. I would just pick things because they looked interesting to me. But as time went on, I found that I became a little bit more curious. So let me ask you this question. How many of you have found that in the course of doing urban sketching over however many years you've been doing it, or months, it doesn't matter, how many of you have found that urban sketching has made you more curious? If the answer is yes, please give me a thumbs up or give me a whole bunch of hearts so that I can see your response. If urban sketching has made you more curious, let me see those hearts. Let me see what you guys think. Has urban sketching made you more curious? I'm going to allow for a little bit of lag in time. Oh, yes, that's right. I see those hearts. Thank you so much for answering. And while looking at all those hearts, so heartwarming. You guys are so awesome. And I can see that people have joined us. Kumi from Japan. Hello. I see absolutely. USK Seattle. Hello. I see people from Eileen, always joining us from San Francisco. Thank you so much. People from Australia. Yes, finally. Well, as you all know, we've shifted USkTalks 12 hours earlier so that we could allow the fans and audience from the Middle East to Australia to watch while it's still kind of daylight. So we'll be moving the time every now and then. So I'm very sorry to all those people who are in Europe. There are some early risers. Yes, thank you for joining us. So awesome. Well, Ludi's coming in. Ludi is coming in from Belgium. That is so awesome. I see from Colombia as well, from Venezuela. Oh, so good. New people. It's always good, so good to see you. All right, so I'm glad to find that you also find that urban sketching has made you more curious. And as we walk about and we look for things to draw, what I found that the curiosity is really, really good because it pushes us to peel back layers. When we see an interesting building, we don't just go, oh wow, I love the texture, which is all fine. But we also start to ask ourselves, how old is that building? Why is it there? Who designed it? I mean, that architecture is fabulous. It's not just appreciating the shapes alone, but we ask ourselves more. We want to know the story. So that's what today's show is all about, because we found that, I'm sure you've also found that, that's the whole act of sketching, the process of urban sketching, leads us to all kinds of discoveries, and we are curious, so we research more so that we've got interesting things to write about when people ask us, why did you draw that thing? Okay, so first, coming up to share with us a whole bunch of tips and background on how he goes about doing his thing, because not only is our first guest the founder of Urban Sketchers movement, and I'm so glad that we finally got him on the show, but he is also a journalist. So I can't wait to dive into how he brings urban sketching into his work and shows us how he goes about doing his thing, that magic thing. And we've got Suhita coming all the way from San Jose, who has found that urban sketching, the act of sketching, has led her to understand, to discover, and to push, to find out about the history, the wealth, and versus the poverty in a place like Silicon Valley, San Jose, California. If you've not been there, it's a fascinating place. I'm so glad to say that I have visited and we've hung out, we've had dinner, we have lots of amazing friends in San Jose, California. Okay, so first up, let's bring in, what happened to my first guest? Oh my goodness, I have accidentally unpinned him, so it looks like. So Gabi, I would really appreciate it if you would put in would you say hi, and I'll catch you again, Gabi, because I've accidentally unpinned you. So sorry. So while waiting for Gabi to say hi again, and so that I can catch him, I don't know what happened. I'm just stabbing the screen. I've accidentally unpinned Gabi. Yes, Gabi. So okay, we're gonna go live with Gabi. I met Gabi the first time in Singapore years ago at the Singapore Symposium. And when I was a green sketcher, Gabi was so nice to me, and I was like, oh, he's the founder of Urban Sketchers, and he's such a nice guy. So thank you, Gabi. And thank you also for influencing thousands and thousands of people around the world with this thing called urban sketching.
You're welcome, Rob. When I met you in Singapore, I was equally amazed at your kindness and how you brought me into the dark side of iPad sketching.
The dark side.
I remember Rob showing me his tools, and I had just gotten my own iPad, so I remember that well. And I've learned so much from you. I also took your workshop in Chicago in 2017. So
that's very kind of you. Thank you, Gabi. Yes, I mean, and for those people who are saying that iPads are sketching on the dark side, let me remind you, we are drawing with light. No, it's a great joke. Started by Alan Wong in Hong Kong. No problem. But we're sketching with light. Anyway, that aside, Gabi, I think most people know you, but for those very few who may not, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yes, of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabi Campanario. Gabi is short for Gabriel, and it's spelled G-A-B-I. I have neither a last name nor a first name that are easy to spell, so that's that for you. I was born and raised in Spain. I grew up in a city in the outskirts of Barcelona, and I went to college in Spain. I went to college for journalism. And I moved to the States in 1998 to work as a graphics editor at a newspaper in Southern California. And I've been in the newspaper industry for some 25 years now. And my current job is in the Seattle Times. This is the sixth newspaper I actually work at.
Sixth? Okay, but and for those of you who know that Gabi is working with the Seattle Times, you have your own column, right? Don't you, Gabi?
I do, but let me clarify. Sketching has only been part of my journalism career in the last 10 years. Before that, I was a graphic artist working in newsroom art departments. I've done page design, I've done art direction, infographics, illustration. I've managed teams of designers. So, and then in the last 10 years, I incorporated sketching into my profession, for better or for worse.
So you've paid your dues, and now you're doing something you really enjoy, in other words.
Right, and I still at the Seattle Times. I'm part of the newsroom art team, so we do illustrations. I do other things as part of my job. The column is what most people see, and certainly what has more connection with the urban sketching community, but it's not the only part of my day job.
Right. Okay. Well, it's so good to know that. I mean, you approve that urban sketching is you sort of validated it because it is a job. I mean, your part of your job centers around it, and that's such an amazing thing. I think it's very heartening for a lot of our viewers to know, because for many urban sketchers, it's a hobby, but it can also be your career. Right?
Yeah, and for me, it was a hobby. Back when we moved to Seattle in 2006, before that, I lived in Washington, D.C. Metro. I worked for USA Today newspaper over there. And when we came here, I was like many sketchers earlier in their urban sketching days. I need to draw more. I want to get better at drawing. And then I did that for a few years. And then I realized, wow, this is really cool. And then that's how the community also started, because I went online, started finding people, and then I even went to my bosses at the newspaper and said, "Hey, this is really cool. We could tell stories with drawings too," and that's how it all started.
Well, that's perfect. That's a perfect lead up to my next question, because I'd like you to really explain to us more in detail of how drawing becomes part of your job and your methodology. Like, how do you go about deciding on the story and using drawing for like visual storytelling?
Yeah, certainly. I like to think of myself. I mean, I was trained as a journalist, but I think I am an artist. I am a sketcher who uses journalism as part of the storytelling process. So, like you all out there, I'm doing the same thing. I'm sketching things, right? but then I'm using tools from the journalist toolbox to turn this sketch into a story. So what I do is I talk to people, I research my subjects. I do have to keep, I do have to be independent from the subjects I cover. That's one of the principles of journalism that makes it different from other forms of communication, right? So what I cannot do is, if my friend, let's say, has a rock band and says, "Hey, come and sketch our concert," if he's my friend and I go sketch a concert and then I put it in the newspaper, it's like, whoa, wait a second, that's your friend, that's a conflict of interest. So I cannot do that. That's how journalism, I'm following the same principles that any journalist, any reporter would follow to produce a story, but the form of the story are the drawings.
Okay. Well,
so and I see some
please.
samples there that we can talk about more, or we can move on to other questions, whatever you would like.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to jump into some of these. Like, maybe you could give us an example with this particular piece. Tell us a little bit, like, how do you decide where it starts? Like, you're in this course of your research. How do you decide on this? This entire page is your work, including the writing, correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So just give us let this be the kickoff and explain how this came about.
Well, kickoff is a good word for that, because that's the headline there. Tailgating season kicks off. Well, years ago, I learned that the football stadium in the University of Washington is a big stadium. Is one of the few, actually one of two stadiums in the country, in the United States, where if you're going to a football game, you can get there by boat. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because the stadium is literally next to the water in Lake Washington. And then I learned that people who have private boats, they go with their own little private boats. But there's also a restaurant that for some 30 years or something like that, and in American history, anything that has happened for 30 years is a long time. This restaurant organizes a big cruise to every single football game.
Wow.
And people buy the ticket for the restaurant. You can have breakfast and then get on the boat, and then you sail to the stadium, and then you sail back. It's a whole experience. So this is an example where themes that are often good for urban sketching, like communities and place and history, came together. So I thought, this is a great story to be told with drawings. So what I did, I called the restaurant and I said, hey, I am so-and-so. I always, of course, identify myself as a news artist for the Seattle Times. And I said, I'd like to do a story about your boat that goes to the football games. And that's how I was able to come on board and talk to the people. I talked to the captain of the boat. I talked to some of the fans and put together the piece. And it's also a timely piece because I did it right when the season started. So that's another element of journalism. Journalism is about covering current events, things that are happening now or as timely as possible. So I'm always looking for topics that are timely.
Okay, I think that's an excellent nutshell. Let's proceed to another one, because I was going to ask you about how drawing leads to questions, which leads to discovery, and that example really encapsulates it. So maybe tell us a few more stories then. Like, give us another example of how this one came about.
Yeah, well, before I was mentioning, over the years, I've done the column for more than 10 years now, a little bit over 10 years. And I've identified certain themes that lead themselves to sketch storytelling better. Those themes, one of those themes is history, seeking history, because history is visible in the urban landscape, the buildings to begin with, which is a big part of what we draw many times, right? So this would be an example of seeking history in Seattle. We have these famous beer brand called Rainier Beer. And there are two brewery locations in Seattle. One is known as the Old Rainier Brewery, and the other one is known as the Rainier Brewery. And I've always been confused. It's like, which one is what, you know? So where did this started? And I finally realized that the old building is where the brewery operation started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But later, in the early 1900s, prohibition came to the United States, so you couldn't produce or sell alcohol. So they had to shut down the whole operation. And then by the time the operation started, it went to a different location, which is the building on top. So anyway, all that convoluted history, I was able to finally learn about it by going there. And then I found the statue of Lady Rainier, which is kind of the symbol of the beer brand. And this statue used to be on the old building, right there at the very top. It was like the centerpiece of a courtyard. But now the statue is like hidden somewhere else behind some bushes in the other building, you know, like kind of forgotten. So that was kind of a sad thing to come across, you know.
Yeah.
So this is an example of history, and the other ones I sent you are about other themes.
You shared with us some really fascinating things. And when I saw this piece, I've seen in documentaries and all that about a floating home. So this was really, really fascinating to me. And I can imagine, it must be quite fun for you because, yes, you have to be impartial and all that, which is fine. But you get to really indulge. You get to pay attention. I think one thing I like about your column, what I love about what you do, is that you pay attention to the little things that happen in your community that are not like the dramatic things, like there's huge things, but you focus in on the human element and what's happening to the people and the little stories that often, get pushed aside or they're not as noticeable. And I love that you put a spotlight on these things.
Yeah, these are basically, the genre, you could say these are vignettes. A vignette is in literary form is something that captures a moment, you know. So sometimes I write them as moments, sometimes I write them as history pieces, sometimes I write them almost like a tour guide. Like I tell people, just go here, you have to check this out, you know. If you come to Seattle, I can take you to so many places that I've discovered over the years. And that one about the floating homes came about because I wanted to know where is the oldest floating home in Seattle. And based on my research is the one you see there. It's kind of run down.
This one.
Yeah.
This big one.
Yeah, that one is and I found something interesting, which is that the old floating home community, the houses are closer to the water. They kind of have a relationship with the water, but the new ones, which I sketched underneath, are these very expensive homes that now are like cubes, and people, instead of being in a porch by the water, they have rooftops. So things have evolved. You know, what used to be a home for the workers of the sawmills by the lake now have become luxury homes. So anyway, I could go on and on each story. So I don't want to take up too much time.
No, that's great, because I mean you have so much great stuff that you're sharing with us. I think it's amazing inspiration. So I'd like you to just tell us, whatever
Okay.
you want to tell us about these stories and how they came about, because I'm sure that a lot of sketchers are curious about, like, for instance, you have lots of questions that you pose when you look at these things, right? Do the answers always come, or are you left hanging still with the questions sometimes?
Well, I think the answers, I think you have the questions and then you seek the answers. This other one here is another theme that leads itself to a lot of sketch journalism, which is hidden places. Every city has hidden places, those little secret locations that only the long timers know about. So I learn a lot just by talking to the locals, and asking them, hey, what's in your neighborhood? Where should I go sketch there? And then people tell me, oh, have you seen the herb garden at the UW campus? There's people who have studied at the University of Washington who tell me they never went to the herb garden because they couldn't find it. So anyway, it's kind of fun. Secret places. That's another interesting theme. Another secret place is the Starbucks on the 40th floor of the Columbia Tower.
Okay.
You can get up to the 40th floor for free,
Right.
have your coffee, have an amazing view, and you don't have to go up the Space Needle. You get a really good view and for free, if you go to that Starbucks. So anyway,
Well,
there are many
that's
like
an
this.
excellent tip. That's an excellent tip for sketches visiting Seattle. Thank you. Okay. Well, you've done so much sketching, and you've drawn so many parts of Seattle now. Has some of what you've done turned itself into a larger project?
Yes, I mean, there's one. I gave you. I think I have a couple of examples there. One
Yeah.
big project has been documenting the transformation of the Seattle waterfront. The Seattle waterfront for years was a working waterfront. I used to have trains coming, and it was like the gateway to Alaska during the gold rush in the early 1900s. But anyway, in the 50s, they built this double-decker giant freeway in the waterfront. And it was noisy. Anyway, and then we had an earthquake.
That one? The viaduct.
The viaduct. It's called the viaduct. We called it the viaduct. And there was a big earthquake in 2001. So basically, the whole structure was not safe. It had to be demolished. But before it had to be demolished, we had to build a tunnel. So for 10 years, this has been every day, the story of Seattle. So I've sketched this and written about the viaduct at different times. When it first started coming down, a few pieces 7 years ago. I've talked to businesses along the route of the viaduct, and this collection of sketches, which ran as a full page in the newspaper, was my last goodbye to the viaduct. So, So this also shows you that you can write and sketch one topic one day, but you can always follow up and keep on it and keep exploring and updating it.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's so much good stuff here. You've got big stories, you've got little stories. You really cover the gamut, and I think that's gonna give a lot of sketchers plenty of inspiration.
Right. And the other one I have, I had another one there, which is I discovered I don't know if it was that one, a road in Seattle that goes from the waterfront. It's called Walking Madison Street.
Oh, this one.
This one, yeah. Somebody told. I think I read it. I read it in a history book. I don't know that there's only one street in Seattle that goes from the saltwater bay to the freshwater lake, and it goes. I mean, if you walk this street, I've walked back and forth. I've run back and forth to get to know about it, and it's 4 miles each way, and you go from the downtown skyscrapers to the quiet neighborhoods to the beach on the other side. There's so much to learn just by doing that, and this turned into a bigger project, as you can see by the multiple drawings.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so inspiring. I think there are lots of people who are gonna think about, well, you definitely put it in our heads now. When we go out, we'll think more about how different places connect and the bigger picture, at the same time enjoying like you said, the little vignettes and all that. how would you explain what you're doing as a journalist who uses drawing, and how is that different from a journalist who just writes? Well, I'm not trying to put down just writing, but the drawing bit and then the writing bit, just
Right.
words.
Well, I think the substance is the same. You can tell the same story about the Viaduct or any of these examples that I've given you about the fans who go to the football stadium. You can tell these stories with photographs. You can do a radio show about them. You can do a film documentary. What makes drawing different is how the audience is going to connect with the story. And the beauty of drawings is that a sketch evokes a scene that the viewer has to complete with their imagination. So there's a level of engagement with drawings that perhaps I think it may be even a little more emotional than if you're watching a movie or a photograph. Also, the sketch is very personal. You can only draw like that. Nobody else can do the same sketch as you, but a lot of people can take photos very similar as you. I think photographers, videographers, and filmmakers have a tougher job putting a personal stamp to their work, because it's harder to have your own voice with a medium that
Right.
is not as personal in nature as sketching. So these stories, yes, they could be told in other forms, but I think we need to tell them with drawings, because we have the potential to reach people who would never read that same story if it came in a book form or or as a video, and
Yeah.
that's where we can make a difference as sketchers.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that resonates with so many of us. And I love how putting a bit of ourselves out there in the drawing as well. There's a very basic connection that happens between the artist and the viewer through that story,
Right.
then in that process. And I think it's also really fascinating how a view that you take with a photograph may not look as compelling, no matter how skilled you are, but somehow even a simple drawing brings out the character and the personality of the place in a way that photos can't.
Right.
Do you find
I
that?
think I think this I think the sketch forces the viewer to participate in the drawing in a different way. So, but the substance is the same. We can tell most of the stories, not every story, leads itself to sketching. The latest home sales report about your city may not lead itself to or a business story of some kind, but the stories of human interest, stories about history, communities, they do work well in drawings.
Okay. Well, I totally agree with you. And like I said, there's so much great stuff here. I just saw that somebody wanted an explanation a little bit about your big pen project. So maybe since we've got this picture up, can you tell us a little bit about your big pen project
Well,
and how that came about?
Well, when I thought about sketching first, and also in the early days of urban sketching, I thought, and this is the mission of urban sketches, we promote sketching as an educational media for its educational value, artistic value, and storytelling value. So I've done a lot of the storytelling in my job, and I've jumped into the teaching educational value. And then I recently discovered what better way to learn to draw than to use a ballpoint pen. A ballpoint pen is ink, so you cannot erase it, but because it responds to pressure, it's like the pencil of ink. You can build layers, you can start soft and gradually add up. So I just, in the past year or so, I've kind of overdosed on big ballpoint pen, and I love it. It's such a great way to train control of the pressure you apply to the paper.
Okay. Well, that's really awesome. I love your big drawings, but I know that after our little conversation in Singapore, you also started working on the iPad.
Oh, of course.
How do you choose when you're going to use the iPad, when you're going to use traditional media, because you're really proficient in both now?
Well, thank you, Rob. I was thinking, I was listening because I've been watching the USkTalks on YouTube, I listened to Mario present the work of Eugene Delacroix, and I was thinking, if Eugene Delacroix was alive today, he would be drawing on an iPad, you know.
Well, thank you.
because it is so convenient, you know. It's just, and for reportage artists, when you're in the field, you know, and the ability to then touch up the work before publication is just a fantastic tool. So I really appreciate that you introduced me to the tool, but at the same time, I love the traditional media. So basically how I keep my mind sane is I do iPad for work and traditional media for educational workshops and for fun. So my pocket sketchbooks are my playground.
Okay.
And the iPad is for my work.
So this, for instance, was done on an iPad, correct?
All the work you've shown, except the floating homes, is iPad.
Oops, yeah. Okay. Ah, I see. Okay. Right. All right. Yes. I
this is not
recognize the
iPad.
marks.
Yeah.
This is not iPad.
This is
But
not
we
iPad.
can talk about brushes that can get this kind of texture now.
Sure, let's do
that'll
that.
be another show. Yeah, but I'm really glad to see. And I think it's really important to be able to do both. So it's there. And for those who are wondering, you probably know that I am iPad only. But the only reason that I'm not dabbling in traditional media is I do not have the space. So if I had more space, well, that's a whole another topic. Okay, jumping back to some of the other stuff that you do as well. Now you've given examples of this where you're using pencil, like. Yeah, so this would be another example of how you're also playing from big pen. You also use pencil, and this is
ink and watercolor.
Ink and watercolor.
And watercolor. So basically, those are basically examples of my pocket sketchbook. That's my everyday. That's my everyday tool. See, I have that one over here. See, it's tiny.
Ah, right.
It's portable. And I love it. And this is actually how my urban sketching started. Okay, I started like this, and I've never stopped having a pocket sketchbook. And then it grew out of the pocket sketchbook. The pocket sketchbook is so handy to take quick notes, visual notes everywhere you go.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our lightning round about tools and all that, because everybody wants to know. So, what apart from the big pen has been like a basic thing that you've been diving into a lot. Can you show us some of your other top favorite tools?
Sure. Okay, so you saw the big pen. So my other favorite tool is a fountain pen, right? And I've used many fountain pens, and I still keep trying new ones. The one that I just discovered recently is this one, is the platinum carbon ink, I think it's called. And the thing about this is that look at the handle. You know, it's like so aerodynamic, right? And the way you hold your drawing tool is, I think it's very important, right? And this is great to practice a drawing grip as opposed to a writing grip. You know?
A drawing grip, okay.
Yeah. When you draw the way you write, you cannot get the range of marks that you can get if you practice more of a drawing grip. Where you draw more with your arms than your wrist or your fingers.
Right. So anyway, this is sometimes 210s, right?
Right.
The writing grip is 210s,
Yeah. So I just love this. It's very aerodynamic, and the marks it makes. This is kind of a very quick sketch that then it got messed up there because I put my finger on top of the ink, but it doesn't matter. This is me on the street taking a quick note. So I love the marks you can make with this. Now, of course, now it's not vertical and it doesn't come out, but I love the marks that you can make with this. And then another tool that I wanted to show is this. I got this from the symposiums, the Cretacolor narrow soft tool is like a oil pencil, and you can make such bold, it's like a pencil, but it gives a great range of marks.
That reminds me a little bit of a Conte pencil, which used to be my traditional favorite.
Right.
But you were saying this is a waxy pencil, correct?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that when you put your fingers on top, it doesn't It
It
doesn't
doesn't smudge.
smear right as much.
Oh,
And you can
okay,
put
okay.
watercolor. You can put
Mhm.
watercolor on top of it as well, if you want
Okay,
to. So
all right.
anyway, so those tools are my new
Hmm.
things.
And do you have a particular brand for that pocket sketchbook? Because there are a couple of people who
Yeah,
are asking.
yeah. These are all the Stillman and Burn soft cover
Hmm.
pocket, and
Okay.
I like the
And
soft cover because it feels on the back of my back pocket.
right.
It's very handy. So
Okay. And do you use just that one size pocket sketchbook? Do you carry other sizes with you sometimes?
I have other, not really. I mean, I have other sizes. If I go on a trip, on a vacation, I have a bigger
Hmm.
sketchbook. If I'm going to have
Okay.
2 hours to sit on the beach, but that's kind of
Hmm.
my everyday sketchbook.
Well, I see a really large drawing behind you. Can you give us a minute and tell us about that?
Well, and this is my latest also like side project or side experimentation, which is not much different from what in the history of art many artists did, like Delacroix or one of my favorites, Winslow Homer. They did sketches and then they turned them into paintings, right? So recently I thought, like, what if I took a sketch from my pocket sketchbook
Hmm.
and then I drew it bigger, you know,
Okay.
right? Or
Right.
I try to draw it bigger, you know.
Wow.
Um,
Look at that.
and the thing is that this sketch is 8 years old. I did
Wow.
this
Okay.
sketch in
Hmm.
2012, and I
Yeah.
did this 2 months ago.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
what I'm trying to do also is practice my visual memory, because
Okay.
we don't draw everything on the schedule. We leave many things out. So
Hmm.
this forces me when I'm on location to kind of try to remember, oh, where was the light? Where were the shadows? And this is
Hmm.
also a moment in time because I don't know you were able to see, but my son, he was 8 years ago, he was like,
Hmm.
I don't know, 6 year old or eight, and he's here throwing a rock on the water. So anyway,
Okay.
that's kind of a new experiment to take my drawings and make them big, and maybe one day I can complete the trifecta of urban sketching, which is storytelling, teaching, and then art. You know, this I can be an
Yeah.
artist. You know, making big things.
Well, you are an artist. You're an artist and you're a hero as well, Gabi.
Oh, okay. Come on.
Okay, so time is coming on, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about this. And it is time for our challenge. Well, your challenge for our viewers today. So tell us about this and how it ties into your challenge, please.
Yeah, well, I want to challenge people and urban sketchers to tell me more about the sketches they make. Tell me more. That's a great question that we journalists use to get people talking. Tell me more. Tell me more. So, next sketch you make or a sketch that you've already made in the past, share it with an informative caption written in your own voice, and just have fun telling me about all that place. You may have to do some research, you may have to talk to some people, but try to write something and see how people will react online. They may appreciate your drawing in a different way because it'll be a complete story. If I put an example of a floating bridge in Seattle, if I just show you the bridge and I don't tell you anything else, then you go, well, what is that? But I could tell you the story about when one of the pontoons came loose and after a big storm, or I can tell you there is a pedestrian walkway on the side that you can walk and cycle and cross from Seattle to the island that is in the middle of the lake. I could tell you many more things. So that's what I want you to do. Tell me more about your sketch.
Okay. And with that, thank you so much, Gabi. That has been such an informative session. I think you've just inspired a whole bunch of people,
Oh,
and
thank you.
I look forward to seeing what people do with the challenge, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun interacting with the audience also as they draw and take that challenge up to tell you more.
Yeah,
Tell you
thank
more.
you. And thank you so
Okay.
much, Rob. And it's been a pleasure. And cheers to all urban sketches out there. I love you.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you,
here,
Gabi.
here, here, here.
See, yes.
My Andy Warhol cup.
See you soon.
Take care.
Take care, Gabi. See you soon. See you around.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so that was Gabi Campanario, all the way from Seattle. The guy who started urban sketching. Now we're jumping across from Seattle, a little south to San Jose, as we try to connect with Suhita. Hello, Suhita.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, awesome. Very excited, very happy to be here, very happy to be talking to you.
Yes, this is
Uh,
exciting.
okay. Well, you've got a lot of fans on the show, and I'm sure lots of people know you. But for those very, very few who don't, would you please introduce yourself and tell us about where you are, what you do?
Sure. So I'm Suhita Shirodkar and I live in San Jose, California.
Mhm,
I've lived here for close to 20 years. I've lived in the US for close to 20 years, but I come originally from India.
mhm.
And I think of both places as home. They feature in big ways in my urban sketching, both those places.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, I work as an illustrator and a graphic designer, and I now teach urban sketching too. So that's what I do.
Okay. Well, it's very exciting to. I remember also. I mean, I met so many urban sketchers in Singapore, and that was the first time I met
That's when
you
I
as
first
well.
met you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We went on some early morning sketch walk with just a few people, and again, time and time again, I come back to how kind people were to me back then when I didn't know anyone. And after that, following your work and following the work of so many urban sketches as well, you've been inspiring so many people, especially with some of the projects that you've been doing. So I'm so glad that you have given us some examples. But before we jump into some of your projects, I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite thing to sketch?
Oh gosh. Before I get there, something you mentioned, I've heard you say how kind people are when you go urban sketching or to a
Yeah.
symposium. And I think that's a standout of urban sketchers. You can be at your first symposium, you can be
Mhm.
terrified and know nobody, and people would just take you in and talk to you and take you on sketch walk. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I think it's a common urban sketcher experience. So it's a
I,
fantastic bunch of people. But
yeah.
talking about things I love to draw, I draw anything. But if I have to choose things I am particularly drawn to, I would say people and action.
Pe-
I love drawing
People.
people.
Uh,
That's yeah,
okay.
that's my kids' orchestra performance. I'll draw anywhere. So that's at an orchestra performance. The other one is at a wedding in India. That's a
Wow.
henna ceremony. I love drawing people.
Oh.
I love drawing cities. I love drawing in
Mhm.
big cities. I think urban chaos is something I
Oh.
particularly love. One of those is in Singapore. The one with the
Oh,
one
this.
golden dome is Singapore. The other one is Mexico City. So
Wow.
both big cities. I love drawing in cities, and I love if I have to choose a place that I want to be. If I have to choose just one place to draw, I would say it would be markets. I
Ah,
love drawing in
markets.
markets.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
drawing in a market. I
I,
mean,
I
we talk
can't
about
wait to get
markets
you here.
everywhere.
I can't wait to get you here to join me drawing some markets
Oh,
in Hong Kong.
I will make it there. I have to draw in your markets. I haven't drawn in the markets of Hong Kong. No. So
Well,
that's California Farmers Market on one side, and the other one is a
uh-huh.
flower market in Panjim, Goa. So I will draw
Wow.
markets anywhere. I love the hustle and bustle,
Yeah.
color, warmth, all those
Yeah.
kind of things. Yeah.
I totally get it because there's so much. Like whether you want to draw like just a few objects or you want to draw an entire scene. Like I love that word, urban chaos,
I
because
love
it's
chaos.
yeah, it's fascinating, right? It's like
Yes.
ooh, candy for the eye and for the urban sketcher. Okay, so I'd like to jump directly into your project with the vintage signs in San Jose, if you don't mind, because I think that is something that's particularly unique and beautiful. What you've done as well to capture that part of history. So
Thank
I'm
you.
not. I'm going to stop blabbing and please tell us how did this start? How did it come about? How'd you get into it?
Sure. So it had an odd beginning. I'm not sure. Like a lot of projects and questions, I don't think I jumped in with a question. So a
Hmm.
little bit of background. What
Hmm.
happened is I've lived in the US in Silicon Valley, home of Apple and Google and everything tech for
Hmm.
years. And oddly, I feel a disconnect to it. And
Hmm.
if you've lived in California and right here in Silicon Valley, you will wonder why, right? It's beautiful. I mean, Rob, you visited, and I think what I find hard to connect to is that it's so efficient, so
Hmm.
clean, and so perfect and new. And that
Hmm.
sounds odd unless you see the kind of places I like to draw. I like to draw in
Yeah.
chaos. There has to be a little bit of the edge of
Grit.
not so
Yeah.
perfect to it.
Right. Yeah.
And at first glance, we are such a new place and such a perfectly clean place. And
Mhm.
So to relate to what is home, I did the only thing I know to draw. I decided to draw right here, starting in my neighborhood and stretching out. And I drew everything around there. And then I look back at my sketches, and these odd things really seem to be catching my attention. There are these signs that do not belong to this time. They do not belong in Silicon Valley. They're from a time before.
Right.
You know, they stand in parking lots. They're in odd places, but they don't have anything connected to them. And I started researching them. And it was really fascinating to me, these things that belong to another time. And I started discovering stories around them. So I wasn't asking a question per se. I was looking for something. I didn't know what the question was. And I discovered all sorts of interesting things. So if you look closely at that sign, I draw too roughly to find out, but that's a motel sign that I found. And it's two sides of a sign. And it has this diving woman on it, this little statue of a diving woman on it. And I'm standing under this sign and I'm drawing it from one side. A few days later, I draw it from the other side. And I noticed on one side, she wears this one-piece bathing suit. Yes. And on the other side, she's in a bikini. And I thought, how odd. Why would you do that? And so, of course, like everything else, one question leads to another. I go research this. And apparently, these signs are the beginning of the automobile age in the US in the 20s. And, you know, that's when neon signs started, because people were traveling and they were driving past and just checking into motels. And so if you see a sign with a diving lady on it and she's in a one-piece bathing suit and a hat, that's an original sign. That was the modesty of the times. That's a sign from the 20s. And if she's wearing a bikini, that's a later copy of the sign. So I found out all these odd little stories that, you know, I wasn't searching for, but they were fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's so cool. And I think it helps to, like, I think of drawing and urban sketching as creating rich memories, because I mean, I don't remember stuff from photos as much, but these kinds of details give it an extra layer, I think.
Sure. Well, when you draw, even if you draw fast, you're standing under that sign 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, right?
Wow.
That's so much longer than if you took a photograph or drove past it. Yeah. And the other thing I found out was history. I've always complained this place is so new. Well, that one you're looking at is the oldest KFC bucket that's still standing in the country. Who knew we had it in San Jose, right? I mean, it's an odd thing to call history in most parts of the world. We call it history. So that's the oldest KFC bucket in the country. On the other side of the sign is, I kept seeing these odd signs. I mean, and they're repurposed now. So this is a grocery store, but they have these starbursts and these very space-agey looking elements. And I learned a lot about architectural history. This is a US architectural movement called Googie design, which was very space age-like from the 50s and 60s. So something else I learned quite a bit of history, not only of the place, but of the architectural history, of the city, of the country. So it was fascinating.
Okay. Well, you're standing in the midst of this chaos, recording history, drawing these things. I mean, I can imagine drawing this signage, for instance, the traffic is going by and all these things are happening about you. We got a good question in the comments. Nemonze, Nimons, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, would like to know, aren't you disturbed while drawing and sketching in the midst of this chaos?
It's an odd feeling for me. Standing in the middle of chaos is like being in the eye of a storm. When you're right in the thick of it, everything else goes away. It's you and your subject. And maybe it takes practice, maybe it works for some people, but for me to stand in the thick of things is to have a first-hand view of it, and you feel what you are in. So if I have to draw a market and I'm in the thick of the market, that energy will translate itself to my page. So no, I'm not particularly bothered by it. Yeah, I will stand right up where those people are. I enjoy that kind of drawing very much.
You must have a lot of interesting interactions with people as well. They'll be asking you, like, what are you doing? And all that sort of.
I do. And sometimes it's possible to talk and sometimes not. Nobody finds it particularly rude. And a lot of very fascinating interactions do come out of, people are not used to seeing an adult drawing or standing there. They're curious. You know, they're curious, they're interested.
Yeah.
and fascinating sort of interactions come out of that. I mean, for me, whole projects have come out of standing there and somebody coming and talking to me. So
Okay. Well, can you tell us about a project then that started with all these and then went a little bigger?
sure. So like those signs you had
Hmm.
on that screen right
Yeah.
there.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's a lot of signs I draw. For a little bit of background, a lot of signs I draw are in
Hmm.
parts of town. They haven't been removed because they're in parts of town that are no longer popular or doing so well or used so much. So they're pretty dilapidated, and I sit by these signs and I draw them. That's a liquor store sign and a Greyhound bus stop sign the Greyhound is now gone from San Jose.
That one.
Yes, and often the only people sitting on that street corner drawing, because I sit down, I either stand or I sit down on the road, and the people standing there are me and the person who panhandles on the corner. And so
Wow.
it's me and somebody who might be homeless or is panhandling there. And I've had fantastic
That
conversations
that
come out of this. Yes. So
that's
I'll
that, that's
often,
you
yeah,
actually.
yes, that's me drawing on location. So I'll stand there and draw. If the best vantage point is standing, I'll stand and draw and paint. So what happened for me is I've drawn on these street corners, right? And another
Hmm.
question that's always been in the back of my mind is, how does it work in Silicon Valley? We are one of the richest parts of the country. We also have huge problems with homelessness. We have
Hmm.
extreme poverty. And because this is a question for me, not related to what I was doing in urban sketching, I went and read reports about it. I read articles. I read all that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
it's very useful, but it paints no picture for you. So I would be
Hmm.
reading and they would be dividing statistics up by, say, by race, by gender, by ethnicity, by problems like high rent.
Hmm.
All of this is super useful, but
Right.
it didn't quite connect to a picture of the people that I
Hmm.
wanted to tell the story of. So
Hmm.
it definitely, yes, so what happened is when I sat on the street and I talked to people, they were telling a very different story. They were telling stories of resilience. They were telling stories of hope, and very different from the stories I was reading in articles. And it led to me moving to the second project, which is called Faces of Recovery, where
Hmm.
I talk to and I draw portraits of people in recovery from homelessness, from abuse, from alcohol abuse, because the stories they have to tell, I feel there is a story to be captured that no facts and figures can capture. So it's been fantastic to move like that. And the connection really for me was me sitting on the street drawing signs and the people that I ended up talking to. So it was, one
Right.
project leads to another.
Yeah, and because I didn't show this earlier, I just wanted to show like from all the work that you've
Sure,
done, you
that's
actually
a book that came out of the project. It's a book
right.
because I drew about 70 signs in San Jose, and I never draw a sign just once. So I have 300 or 400 sketches of these signs.
Hmm.
So they ended up being a book one day, and then we had a show at History San Jose, which is our local museum. So it
Oh,
was,
that's amazing.
and I want to mention something from the beginning of this project. It's very core to urban sketchers, I think. It One of the core missions of urban sketchers is to share what you do. And
Hmm.
you not only share what you do because you'd be surprised at other people that are interested in it, but
Hmm.
you also find experts in the field. You find other connections. You find fascinating things from sharing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And is this like part? I've seen you where you've written someplace where you're connecting dots. Is this what you mean by connecting dots?
Yes, this idea of you do what you do and you put it
Hmm.
out,
Hmm.
and you never know who is out there that's an
Hmm.
expert or has a different opinion or has a
Hmm.
story. So many signs were introduced to me by people who followed my work. They said, "Hey, do you know this sign here?" And
Right. Okay.
so you don't have to connect all the dots yourself. You do the
Right.
work and you put it out, and the dots will connect, I think.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I think that's also an example of how urban sketchers can really, really get. I think the simple act of drawing really allows us to connect with the community in ways that with and open doors that normally would not
Ye-
open up, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
I'm sure you found that too. Wow.
Definitely.
Wow, that's well, it's such inspiring work, and you've just given us another example as well of this. Like,
Yeah, so I ended up, one thing leads to another. So I ended up being part of a preservation council here in San Jose. And I think you had a sketch with, yes, that pig and that other sign is two signs we ended up saving while I was on the council. So
wow,
we did that work. And then the other sketch you have with the home
yeah,
is there's a big Victorian home that was saved. So it was literally pulled by a truck and transported to a new location. And of course, I I mean, I had to
wow,
be there as part of the committee and I sketched it. So it
wow.
all works together. It all works together.
That's amazing. I mean, how long have you been urban sketching, Suhita, if I may
I
ask?
think this is year 11 of having known urban sketchers. So
Okay.
yeah, not from the very beginning, but for a long time now. I think it's part of how I define myself now. I don't know what I'd be without urban sketchers.
Well, I totally understand that, and I love how we can like I've connected with you. I know you because of Urban Sketchers, and I've met so
That's
many
right.
other people, and
It's
so have you,
amazing.
right? So we have friends all over the world.
There
It's
you
a
go.
global tribe. And the body of work that you have here is so fascinating. It is, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm going to put up very quickly for those of you who are not aware. These are the handles for our guests before Gabi's as well as Sugita's Instagram. Please go check it out. Take a screenshot so that you have reference and access. And as the top of the hour, at the end of the hour is coming along, can you tell us about what challenge you have for
That's
our
right.
audience,
Yeah.
please?
So very quickly, like leading back to my last project, the project where
Hmm.
I draw faces of people and tell their stories of
Hmm.
homelessness. It started with my asking, what if I draw people and capture their stories? Will I see a different big picture? And I think the
Hmm.
important thing is when you think of a what if to follow up on it. So
Hmm.
my challenge is to ask yourself a what if and follow
Uh-huh.
up on it and see where it takes you. Now, of course, no drawing from your imagination and following up. We're urban sketchers. So draw from observation and either answer your what if or see where else it leads you. And I'd love to show examples of two sketchers that I have there. So the first sketch I want to show is that's Richard Briggs. And his question is, he was lying one day on his back looking up through the canopy of trees. And he said, what if I lie right here and draw that scene? And of course,
Wow.
he solved it by getting two volunteers to hold his book above him. And he drew that scene. So that's a very simple what if. And he followed up. He found a creative way to solve his what if. So follow a
Wow.
what if and follow your question and post your what if along with your sketch. It doesn't make sense without the sketch. The two to go together. And the other example I wanted to quickly show is Laurie Wiggum's sketches. Laurie Wiggum lives in San Francisco, and during COVID, all she could do was do a daily walk on the hill behind home. And she said, I always see these wildflowers and I never remember their names. What if I draw them one by one? Will that cement the flowers and their names and everything about them in my brain? And she did this big project where she drew for weeks. She drew every wildflower she saw. That's her what if. So what if is the question, and follow it up in your urban sketches and see where it takes you.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic challenge. I'm sure lots of people are going to take it up. And before we jump off, can we just do a quick round of the lightning round? Show us some of your tools and your
Sure,
favorite
very
stuff to
quickly. I'll do
draw.
that super quickly. I know I'm at top of the hour. So I like tools that are super versatile to use. So everything I use very little. I will use a Fude bent nib pen, which is a pen that gives you thick and thin lines. So that's a Fude bent nib pen. It's a
Okay.
yeah, and the other brush I use is this sort of brush that has this chisel tip, this, what do you call them? I'm forgetting what you call them now. But it's this kind of tip that you can use on your side for a big fat stroke, or you can use it, it's called a dagger brush, or you can use
Dagger,
it
yeah.
as a little point. So that's a dagger brush. And those two tools for me, one tool, many things. And the books I use are also Stillman and Byrne books. I use them in all kinds of sizes. I like the hardbound because it's like having a base to draw on. I stand and draw a lot. And I use the ones that are wire bound because I often draw so quickly that a page is wet with watercolor when I flip it over and I hang my book. And I start on the next page.
Ah,
So I
right,
have
okay.
one wet page and I'm starting on the next one. And I'll use big, small, big when I travel. Today I was drawing at a local protest, so a little one that
Wow.
fits in my hand. So any size of book, but something versatile, something for mixed media. That's what I use.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Suhita, for being on the show and for sharing with us all these amazing things. Your amazing stuff has just wrapped up the hour for us, so we have to wrap the show. But we hope to have you back.
Oh, yeah, we have that. That's the
Yeah.
Urban Sketchers Pune mug. So cheers.
Wow,
And
Urban Sketchers
thank
Pune.
you to the team for everything they do to make this possible.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You've been a wonderful guest, and we hope to see you again. I hope to sketch with you again next
Lovely.
time I'm back.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, Suhita. Okay. Well, that was quite a show. I hope that you've been really inspired. We had Gabi Campanario, founder of USK, as well as Suhita Shirodkar, all the way from San Jose, and they gave us so much to think about. If you're going to participate in the challenges, and I highly recommend that you do, it'll get your brain going, it'll give you something to think about. USkTalks challenge hashtag and tag the name of the guest because they're looking forward to seeing what you guys draw and come up with. So before I go today, I just wanted to also give a huge shout out. In addition to thanking our wonderful guests for being on the show, I also wanted to give a shout out to the USkTalks team. I've got pictures of them. These are the amazing people behind the show. Everyone's a volunteer. So Mario, Noga, Rita, Elizabeth, Riona, and Ludi and Christina. Christina is recording this right now. That's how these shows will go on to IGTV as well as YouTube. So for those of you who want to check something back, IGTV, we're also on YouTube. Catch up with previous episodes. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you, and we'll be back next week with something else that is amazing. So take care. Our hearts go out to all of you in the US who are facing all the protests that are happening. Please fight on. Freedom of expression and fighting injustice, something that's really, really important. And coming to you from Hong Kong, I'm sure that you can understand why as well. Okay, have an amazing week, people. Be safe, be well, keep sketching.